1.
Cool, and I'm going to hit record on my end as well, just in case.
Very cool.
So I have to roll set to on. Okay, I'm going to record Zoom.
You good?
Yes, I am recording. I have to just sync clap though, because I'm recording separately.
My audio good, you said? You can hear me good?
Yeah.
Okay.
All good. All right. Welcome along to the Cult Popture Movie Club. My name is AJ, and I'm joined by Richard, Ryan, and Vincent. This is a special podcast that we're doing with our Patreon, where if you donate $15 or more per month, you get to join us for this Zoom call. And today it's a ratio of 2 to 2, hosts to patrons. And we might have someone else later, but
can't edit those out on this.
No, you'll hear a lot of things that usually get cut out. Probably that'll make it into this one, like weird laughs and breaths that I usually cut out. But yeah, this is our movie club. So we are going to, for about an hour, we're going to discuss a film. And the film that we're discussing for the first episode of the Cult Popture Movie Club is Taxi Driver. Woo!
Woo! Cinema. Pure cinema.
How is it going, Vincent and Ryan? How are you guys?
I am well. Alive.
Doing all right.
Cool.
All right.
Nice. All right. Well, let's crack in. Taxi Driver is a 1976 Martin Scorsese film written by Paul Schrader and stars Robert De Niro, Jodie Foster, Sybil Shepherd, Harvey Keitel, Peter Boyle, Leonard Harris, and Albert Brooks. It's about a taxi driver in New York complaining about things, and
So we all.
It is considered one of the, if not one of the greatest movies of the 1970s, one of the greatest movies of all time. And so we're going to talk about why that is. Probably talk about what we think of it. Its similarities to 2019's Joker of many of other of all things. And then maybe discuss some interpretations of the film. I watched a couple of Taxi Driver explained videos, so I'm all like knowledgeable on what the story means. But before we get into what the story means, I'd love to know what everyone thought about it. Richard,
Or do we want to know what it's about and kind of deeper?
It's about a taxi driver complaining about things.
Okay, all right. I mean, like, do you want to talk about the plot details of it?
Do you want to do that? You could do that.
Well, no, I don't.
Well,
I thought
it's up to
Ryan / Gas Cadet or Vincent Lara could do that.
Okay. It's 96% on Rotten Tomatoes, by the way.
Todd Phillips' Taxi Driver?
Yes.
Yeah.
What's it about?
Oh, okay. Just making sure I watched the right movie. Disgruntled veteran, tired of society, I guess, looking at everything with a soured eye, just like the seedy underbelly where someone would come and clean the whole place up. And I guess he was just looking for a purpose, so he started becoming a taxi driver.
Yeah.
He gets tangled in with a seedy crime underlife in New York City in the 70s.
Mm-hmm. Yep, he gets driven to trying to assassinate a presidential candidate, instead of doing that, because he chickens out, he then assassinates a pimp because he befriends a 12-year-old sex worker played by Jodie Foster. And so he destroys an entire brothel. He kills all the people in a brothel.
Yeah.
It survives, potentially, depending on your interpretation, and is lauded a hero of the city for cleaning up, despite the fact that he could have just as easily been lauded as a villain, like a who killed JFK? I'm trying to remember the guy.
Lee Harvey Oswald.
He could have been a Lee Harvey Oswald, but instead he's a guy.
He's a Jack Ruby.
Oh,
Ooh.
Very nice, Richard. Thank you. So, what did everybody think of it? Keen to hear people's thoughts. Is it the best movie ever?
I do want to just check with you, Ryan and Vincent. Have you guys seen this before?
No.
I had actually seen it. I had actually only seen it last year because of all the comparisons to the Joker. Like I was aware of its existence, but I had never seen it until last year, before I saw Joker.
Nice.
But keen to rewatch it.
Nice. I'd seen it once before and I did not remember it. And there's a very embarrassing episode of the Cult Popture podcast from maybe 2 years ago where Taxi Driver was given to us to pitch a TV show based on it. And I recounted a plot that was not Taxi Driver as trying to explain what it was. And I don't know why I said what I said.
What did you say? It was like Underground Assassins.
I thought it was about Underground Assassins. That's not what it's about.
Remember that?
You must have mistaken with Queen Latifah's Taxi, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And Jimmy Fallon.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hadn't seen it before. If you go on the front page of Letterboxd and organize the films by most popular, there's the 72 in a page, and Taxi Driver was the only one I hadn't seen on that front page. So now I have. And that's why we're doing it for this one, because I was like, oh, finally a reason to watch it where I'm in control of what we watch. But I enjoyed it. It was kind of, it's a weird, obviously the kind of disgruntled guy does a crime thing is very similar to Joker, and like this is pretty much just going to be a Joker podcast as well.
Oh, it's so much smarter than Joker,
but
though,
that's the thing. Is that like, well, because with Joker, it's like, obviously the film's called Joker, and Joaquin Phoenix cast as the Joker, so it's coming the whole time. Whereas in Taxi Driver, there's the kind of element of like, nothing's really happening. And it's I think like 35, 40 minutes into the film, Jess came home and I was watching it, and I was like, and she was like, oh, what's this actually about? And I was like, it's hard to say. Like, nothing's actually happened yet. Like what I would call like the inciting, like a clear inciting incident doesn't really happen until like almost the end of the film, really. It's just, and rather than having your main character be like, the worst thing about having a mental illness is you're expected to act like you don't have one, and things like that. It's kind of just like, there's nothing clearly wrong with him. There's just something a little bit off about him, and it becomes clearer and clearer each time we see him.
Yeah, the mental illness is shown rather than told, where things like he talks to Peter Boyle's wizard, who's like the old wise taxi driver who all the other taxi drivers look up to, and a very young Peter Boyle who I've never seen look like that in any other thing I've seen him in.
Yeah, who doesn't look that young.
No, yeah. And it's a really interesting way to shoot a scene and convey that information, because instead of Travis Bickle saying to Wizard, here's what's wrong with me, Robert De Niro performs it very realistically as someone who doesn't know how to articulate their thoughts. He's like, I've been the city, man. And he doesn't actually say anything, which is frustrating dialogue, but also very realistic. And if you've ever talked to someone who's got struggling mental issues, that is certainly a lot more close to home, that they can't figure out how to explain what they mean. The most he gets out is that he's been having dark thoughts.
Well, it's all he's having, isn't it?
It's all he has are dark thoughts, yeah.
And he's tired of pretending it's not.
I'm going to become the taxi driver. I'm keen to know what Ryan and Vincent, what did you think of the film?
You can go first, Vincent.
All right, since this is my first time ever watching it, and just knowing it from like meme culture of like, oh, you talking to me? You must be talking to me.
Yeah.
Like when it finally got to that scene, it was like, oh wow, this is actually powerful versus just a quotable thing. But overall, I loved Robert De Niro in this movie. Like after we just saw Godfather Part 2, it's like, oh, he was great in that. Like, of course, fucking Robert De Niro was great. But seeing this and the way he shows a person who's just always hanging on edge, but doesn't really go off the deep end until the end. It's like that slow progression. Like we said, like nothing happens in the movie except you see a man slowly go insane in this cesspool of New York, and it's just brilliant. Like, and then again watching Joker, it's like, oh yeah, you really like Taxi Driver, didn't you? You really liked that movie. You got Robert De Niro in your Joker, but he's just there. Yeah. Like seeing that Robert De Niro of 2019 versus this Robert De Niro is this the same person? of just the way you're approaching this role. Like Robert De Niro, he just played like a cheesy, talk show host in Joker. Whereas this, like every single movement he does and every single thing he says is so like set in a way where you see someone just hanging by a thread, and just the way he interacts with like Betsy or interacts with the other taxi drivers, like he's there but he's not present, he's always in his own mind. Like especially that one shot with the salt and the water, how he just puts, and the gunshot as well, but the salt and the water was like the first one that caught me, like yeah, he's just zoning out, just looking at something so mundane, even though he's trying to interact with the rest of the world, he just can't.
Yeah.
And Jodie Foster in this movie, like the only other thing I've ever seen her in is like Silence of the Lambs, and that's about it. So it's like just seeing like this 12-year-old just acting amazingly with this other man, like in his 20s, like their scene in the cafe when they get breakfast. Like it doesn't feel like De Niro's commanding the scene. She's just as present and just as much of an established character in that moment. And I thought their unlikely like friendship, like it's not really a friendship, it's just him being like, oh, I'll save you. She's like, oh, whatever. And she's not really into it. And then just in the end, how it comes and how it wasn't really about him trying to kill a presidential candidate. It was just him trying to do something good in his mind. And when the presidential candidate assassination failed, it's like, well, I'll go out trying to save this girl.
I guess.
Yeah. Well, he's a powder keg, right? Because it's like he's lauded as a hero, but it was incidental. He just wanted to kill someone, and it's just so happened that the presidential candidate was too hard to kill, so he killed someone that happened to be a good thing for society. Very
just Harvey Keitel with a long head of hair.
Yeah, his name's Sport. Harvey Keitel is Sport.
Kind of like how the Joker didn't intend to have the crowd go along with him, the clown iconography. He just was coincidentally like, I'm starting to think that movie was inspired by this a little bit.
It's very transparent, isn't it? It's actually it's as bad as everyone had said, I think, because when I saw Joker, I didn't remember Taxi Driver. I thought it was about assassins, and so
you're like, I don't get the comparison.
And so, but it is there in the distinct apoliticalness of both Arthur and Travis, right? Because there's a scene early on where Travis has this presidential candidate in his car, and he talks to him and he's like, oh, I'm telling everyone to vote for you, which he's only doing because there's the hots for Betsy, who is a campaign worker for, so it's all empty, right? He's just wanting to impress her. And the presidential candidate is like, well, what do you think is the biggest problem in the city? And he doesn't really have an answer. He just says it's a shithole and it needs to be cleaned up. And it doesn't mean anything. It's like a man wanting to have a cause, but he's too superficial to think of what that cause should be. And it ends up, luckily for him, depending on how you interpret the ending, which we'll get to later, it's empty. Like it's empty. It's he just happens to kill the right person as opposed to the wrong person. Could have just as easily been the wrong person.
Yeah. And so Ryan, what about you? What did you think of it?
Well, I was gonna say, when you were talking about Palantine, I don't know if it was just me, but every time I saw Palantine's, that was his name, right? The presidential candidate. Every time I saw it, I know it's Palantine, but I just couldn't think of Palpatine. I couldn't get that out of my head. I'm like, is his name Palpatine? And I see just Palantine. I'm like,
Senator Palantine.
Exactly like it. Yeah, but what I thought about the movie, I don't know. I really thought it was really well made. I had seen it before, but like, I just didn't like the character of Travis Bickle, and I get, obviously he's supposed to be an unsympathetic, protagonist. He's not supposed to be likable, but I just thought it was like an incel, like in Joker, like the anthem. I was just he's just thinking about the city being crime ridden and and everyone needs to come in here and clean it up, but he doesn't have like a point to it or anything like that. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know what much to say. I like the way it was made. I like the iconography that's Martin Scorsese. He didn't write it, so he just directed it, right?
Paul Schrader wrote it.
Okay, I like the iconography of like the $20 bill had, how that like kept lingering on it through different parts of the movie, and it like kind of like carried its way throughout the movie. I liked stuff like that. I thought it was very well made. I just didn't know why I didn't like Travis. Even I know you weren't supposed to be on his side or anything. I loved his performance, De Niro's performance, but I couldn't get that out of my head thinking about it.
Yeah.
Well, the
Talking about the iconography, it is fun watching old movies like this, and then like we did with The Godfather on Film Practice One. It's that, yeah, like it's one of these things where you watch this film and you go, oh, that's where that's from, and like, I mean, obviously a lot of them already come from Taxi Driver, but seeing how they actually work into the story, like obviously the "you talking to me" scene in the mirror, it's like so iconic, but it's one of those classic ones that's quite understated in the movie.
yeah.
Like it's not like the film stops so you can like have this scene kind of thing. It's just like he's
It's
talking to himself in
actually
the mirror.
it's
And-
actually not at all how people quoted it either.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
When
Yeah.
it's parodied in film, it's like, "Are you talking to me? Because there's nobody else here, so you must be talking to me." I don't think he even says it that way. It's
Yeah,
like,
and he
like "You talking to me? You talking to me?"
and you think it would be reincorporated later the way he says it too, because he's doing
Yeah.
it while he's testing
like
the
rehearsing.
sleeve loader. But then when he just does it later, he just does it, and it's fuck
Mm.
you. It's unceremonious. But he
Yeah.
is planning it like it's going to be a big badass, hero moment.
Something
it's
like
not even
"Hasta la Vista, baby," and
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
Terminator.
Terminator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to talk about, Ryan, you brought up the incel sort of perspective of it, which is real interesting because
Because
this is-
AJ will be able to give us an insight into that.
exactly. Brent is here. Admit. I think that
Hello, Brent.
hello, Brent.
Hello, Brent.
Hello, Brent.
He's connecting to audio.
Hello, Brent.
Hello, Brent.
Hello, Brent.
We can't
Hello, Brent.
say something, Brent. Can we hear you? Oh, he's connecting. I'll just keep talking and we'll come back
Yeah.
to Brent.
Brent, just for context, AJ's telling us about. He took his headphones off. It doesn't matter. I was going to call you an incel again.
There is a reading of the film that Travis is an incel. But this is 1976. Incels become a term in the last 2 years, right? So it's not
Yeah.
like that was a common thing. And Ryan, I wonder if you saying you didn't like the character is something to do with a 2020 lens of watching this film, because I watched a few interpretations of the film, like videos about it, and one of the things that one of them said is like, you're supposed to like Travis initially. You're supposed to be like charmed by his like attitude and his go get him attitude with how he goes after Betsy and stuff like that. Whereas it's actually, like Martin Scorsese has said, it's actually supposed to be quite a feminist film. It's supposed to be a film about a man who just like this whole thing acts as like an afterthought to the Vietnam War, right? So it's like he's a Vietnam veteran, and so on top of everything, it's mentioned like twice, but on top of everything, he is shell shocked. He's got PTSD and can't sleep, and that's why he does night shifts. But the feminist angle on it is that it's about a man who feels like he needs to either woo a woman like Betsy, and he thinks she's different. He thinks she's the best, the most.
She's hashtag not like other girls.
She's not like other girls. And when he can't achieve, her love, the next thing he does is he saves a girl, which is the two dichotomies of masculine viewing of a woman is you either have sex with one or you save
or
one.
you live long enough to save one.
And so I thought that was a really interesting look at it, is that despite because it's painted as a positive thing that he saves Jodie Foster's character from the brothel, but earlier in the film that her character is talking about how her parents, she doesn't like her parents and doesn't want to go back home to her parents, which I'm sure is better than a brothel, but it's still not a solve to the problem. And as we find out at the end, she does get taken back to her parents, but to Travis it's like, I have to save you, and it's actually quite a selfish a selfish rescue in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I feel like we've talked about incels a lot on the podcast, but not since I think the American Pie episode we've actually explained what it means. Because a lot of people might not know that.
But does Brent want to explain what it means? Newcomer Brent.
we
Looking
can
at
hear
the
you.
group, looking at the group and the little bar at the top, I think that we probably all know. Some of us may even be amongst their ranks.
Well, he pointed you out. It takes one to know one.
Oh! No, Brent has a kid, though. He has proof. He is proof.
Ooh.
None of us have proof.
Yeah, here's
Maybe
proof of
maybe
the
I
cell
have
part
as
of
an
it.
now that I've had the kid, I've gone back into celibate status.
Okay.
There
Yeah.
you go.
So an involuntary celibate, essentially people who are too socially inept to get laid.
They believe that because of the way they look or the way they act, they're not allowed the sex that they are owed by being a man.
Yeah.
But then they also take that out on women, as in like looking as
Well, it's a response and a like an immediate like reaction to like a rising feminist like status quo, like most people are feminist these days.
Yeah, well, especially since the release of Taxi Driver, which was such a feminist film.
Martin Scorsese said it was a feminist film. I didn't make that up.
Did he really? Well, how long ago did he say that? Did he say that like in 2006, or did he say that like?
He said they're the height of the Me Too era. They're like, "What do you think of this?" And he's like, "Well, actually, I made a feminist film."
Yeah, they're like, "Martin Scorsese, you wrote the character you played to say the N-word in this." He's like, "Do you know it's actually a feminist film?" Oh, really? Tell us more about that.
Maybe he meant that in the context of the women, of the two like female leads, like I could potentially see that like they are good feminist characters, but obviously the overall story doesn't come off that way.
Well, it was just what I was saying before, that it's feminist in the way that it like paints a very damning picture of a modern 1970s hero, and that it's not shying away from any of that, and it's jumping headfirst into that. While also simultaneously being a movie about nothing at the same time.
It is funny because talking about he said Martin Scorsese wrote himself to say the N-word. He didn't write it, but Paul Schrader wrote it. Has said that the film was somewhat autobiographical for him, because he would like drive around late at night and he like couldn't sleep, and he drove around and he kind of became a bit of a loner, a bit of a recluse. But I'm like, why would you admit that? Like, of all the films to say, like, yeah, this really write what you know, I guess. Why would like Taxi
I tried to
Driver?
assassinate the president, and like, it actually
I said the N-word once.
Yeah,
once, and it was to tell someone what it was. The story was inspired by a real life assassination of a politician, in which the assassin was then like given the same treatment that like a celebrity who tabloids think is pregnant gets, right? Like I can't remember the name of the people involved, but it was like someone killed a candidate and they were blasted on the covers of like Women's Weekly and stuff, sort of like
which is we not that I don't think they have Women's Weekly where the guests are from, but like Gossip Mags kind of thing. But it also it inspired a real life presidential assassination attempt, which the Americans amongst us, like, are you guys taught this in like history class, and like, are you kind of taught about this or
vaguely?
Vaguely, yeah.
You're talking about the potential assassination, or you're talking about its connections to Taxi Driver?
Well, either actually.
Are you referring to the attempted assassination on Reagan?
Yeah, John Hinckley Jr. I think was the guy's name.
John Hinckley.
Obsessed with Jodie Foster.
Yeah, wanted to impress a young Jodie Foster, and thought, assassinate Reagan.
Interesting. So let's. Well, first of all, Brent, as since you came in late, do you want to tell us what you thought of the film?
Well, so I just opened my notes as I was listening to y'all, and literally the first thing that I wrote was Travis Bickle is an incel. But the kind of what I thought about it was like, I really enjoyed it. I didn't have a lot to write. Like, I know people have written dissertations on it, and it's one of the most studied films out there for its particular thing. It's a great movie, but it felt to me like it was a really good look at just kind of like the idea of the American dream, like that if you work hard and put your mind to something and do what you want, or you can do what you want, you can do anything, but with the undertone of so long as you don't have, like a life untreated medical condition and it's going to prevent you from handling rejection.
Yeah. I like
so
I
thought that was a really good commentary on, and again on the Vietnam War stuff. I got lots of Rambo vibes from him kind of snapping, which I thought was really cool. So
it's like the other side of the Rambo coin, right? Like it's like Rambo is very celebratory, whereas Taxi Driver is like, this is what the Vietnam War did to our sons.
Well, the first Rambo is a lot more kind of sympathetic, and then Rambo's one of those movies where like all the sequels miss the point of the first one,
right?
Because the first one, like, he only kills one person and it's by accident, and then by the time the fourth one came out, they're like, there's a kill every 8 seconds in this film.
Very nice. What we could talk about for a bit is the ending, because there are several interpretations of the ending. So at the end of the film, the climax of the film, as we said, he shoots up a brothel, he kills Harvey Keitel, he kills all the dudes in the brothel to save Jodie Foster. He gets shot quite a few times, to the point where it seems like he's probably been fatally wounded. And the cops bust in and see him lying or sitting on a couch covered in blood, and he holds his fingers to his head, goes, and then there's like a sort of soul leaving body shot from overhead that goes out of the brothel, and you see all the violence he's caused, and you see a bunch of police cars showing up, to what I think would be pretty fair to assume is the end of the film, roll credits. But then it cuts to sometime later, and he's grown all his hair back because he had a mohawk for a bit. And he's a taxi driver again, and he gets into his taxi only to see that Betsy, who had previously rejected him for taking her to a porn theater on their first date, she's back there, and she's like, I read about you in the paper. And he's like, oh, yeah, I'm doing all right. And then he drops her off, and he drives off into the night of New York. And there's this very eerie and alarming moment just before the credits start, where it's sort of playing the jazzy saxophone score, and then all of a sudden the music kind of glitches, and you see him like look into his rear vision mirror very alarmed, and then he like looks away, and it's like it's almost
paranoia.
It's almost like a it reminded me of like, what does Bill Murray whisper at the end of Lost in Translation kind of thing. It's like, what did Travis see? What did he see?
It's a McClunky.
A McClunky. There we go. And I was watching some interpretations of all of this to try and figure out, like, because like you see Robert De Niro go like this, and immediately I'm like, oh, people would have been talking about this for years. What did Travis see? Right? It's the same at the end of Hamilton. What's her name? The
Eliza,
like gasps at something in front of her, and it's never told to you what it is. And so there's this similar conversation of what did Eliza see, and a very popular interpretation of the scene, as I'm sure anyone who's ever interpreted a film open for interpretation would know of, is that it's all his dying visions. As he's fading away, he envisions himself as he's lauded as a hero, which is what he always wanted, and the girl of his dreams, who he's scared off for being a legitimate menace to society, is now like in his taxi and wanting to reconnect with him, and all this sort of thing. And hearing that interpretation, I was like, that's gotta be it. Like, this is, his hair's all back, it's very Hollywood ending, and so I was like, so it's a dream sequence. But Martin Scorsese, Paul Schrader, and Robert De Niro have all said no, it's not a dream sequence, which is interesting. They haven't said it's open for interpretation. They've said no, it's not a dream
I quite
sequence.
like that. Two things while you're talking, Brent. Is that a dog you're holding? Oh, look at it.
This is Amy.
His name is Travis.
And also, you took a sip from what was a very American-sized drink.
Actually, this is a Route 44. So there's a chain here called Sonic, and so there's like a small, a medium, a large, and a Route 44, which is a play on the Route 66, except that this is 44 ounces of what they call ocean water.
Oh.
Which is like Sprite with
it's just salty water as
It's like a crab in it.
It's Chaps' drink.
Every growing boy needs.
It is interesting talking about the soul leaving body overhead shot, because I remember in film school, the tutor telling us not that like you'll seem really amateur if you write shots into your script. Like you should never, like in the script, you shouldn't talk about like cut to or like close up or anything like that. But he said, unless it's like you need that shot to tell the story, which is very rare, and you'll probably never see it. But the example he used was the overhead shot in Taxi Driver.
Right. So that's on the script.
Yeah. And so because it is very easy to interpret that as like soul leaving body, but it's also like it's kind of a look at the damage he's done kind of thing that can kind of only be shown in that kind of shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, all three of the big main players involved have all said it is real, which is cool because I'm too old for "it was a dream" twists. You know, I'm too wizened for this. I don't need this. I've seen this. I don't need to have another movie where it's the ending was his dying vision. And so.
So what do you think he saw then?
So, well, Martin Scorsese, surprisingly, has just said what he's seen as well. Which is
I
like,
respect that.
Really? Yeah. It's that I think I tweeted this out once, which was on a scale of David Lynch to J.K. Rowling, how willing are you to explain your art? because David Lynch doesn't say anything, and J.K. Rowling ruined her career through explaining things. And so I think it was the DVD commentary for like a re-release, he talked about it, and he said he times it as if people don't know exactly what he's going to say. He's like, and so coming up here, there's this moment where it's right here, and it's like exactly on. It's like, of course, that's the moment you're talking about. And he said what it represents is that the ending is supposed to be this very cynical look at how the wrong person can be lauded a hero when they could have just as easily become a villain, right? That's the point of the scene. And
he lived long enough to see himself become the hero.
Exactly. And it's sort of like this dangerous look at how you can, you know, and the girl, he even gets the girl. Like it's supposed to be tragic because by the end of the movie you feel very conflicted about him, and he almost doesn't deserve this ending, which is a very interesting thing. I've never seen another movie do that, where it's like it gives you the good ending when it should have been. It's usually the other way around, right? And so Martin Scorsese says it's essentially Travis is a ticking time bomb, and while he is in and filmed in an angelic state for this whole epilogue, and it's like, hey, look, things got better. He saved the day. He's a hero. He got the girl. He's a taxi driver again. It's supposed to show that like a snap and he's back to paranoid again. Like he thinks he sees something.
Right.
And so it's like he's back on his bullshit. Like,
If only YouTube existed in the 70s, Scorsese could make his own ending explain videos.
Well, he doesn't need to, because I watched a Joe Blow one. And it's real interesting because like Paul Schrader has also essentially said the same thing in a Reddit AMA. And apparently as well, Robert De Niro believes the character is still alive and has once said like, I would love to return to the character and see what Travis is doing nowadays. And he said this to Paul Schrader, and Paul Schrader said, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. And said that Travis Bickle dies 6 months after the end of the film.
Nice. I think it's a more interesting ending if he's still alive because of what it. Now I'm going to say the word, but what it says about society. Like the fact that it's like we laud these people as heroes, even if it's not necessarily as heroes, but like we make celebrities out of them. And it's like only very recently have we kind of is there movement to be like stop saying the killer's name. Like, talk about the victims and stuff like that. Whereas, like 10 years ago, it was all like, this man murdered everyone and this is his name. And then this is like his girlfriend we got for an interview.
And you can buy John Wayne Gacy dish towels, so it's like
yeah.
Yeah.
But
we
and
have a
so
cult of personality around serial
it's a
killers.
very similar theme to covered in another Scorsese film, The King of Comedy, which has anyone here seen?
No.
No.
Is that on our roulette list?
I might have to edit, but
Because I want to see that.
It's very
What
good.
if we
It's,
just do Robert De Niro films in here?
yeah,
And Martin Scorsese.
yeah, because it's obviously that's kind of the other big influence on Joker, but it's a very similar kind of like, there's something bubbling under the surface, crime happens, good ending kind of thing. But it's the same kind of thing about who should we be investing like celebrity stock in,
Mm-hmm.
I'll add it to the roulette list for this.
Cool. Nice. So, does anybody else have any things they want to talk about or thoughts? This is an open floor, an open discussion for our wonderful patrons.
Something funny. I thought that. Did you guys say that you're not watching The Boys, or AJ was that ready to record to be taken seriously? You haven't watched.
I will, but I haven't.
I'm one episode. I have the finale of season 2 to watch.
Oh, okay. It wasn't a spoiler for that. There's a scene in season 2 where somebody's watching Taxi Driver, and it just says to the horrible people that are in that show, that and to the horrible people that would take Travis Bickle seriously.
Right.
It's just,
Well, a similar thing happened where there's a big plot point around Chris Christopherson, because Betsy compares Travis to a Chris Christopherson song, and then Chris Christopherson is a main character in the Blade trilogy, which is this Monday's upcoming film franchise.
And he's also the voice of the lone dinosaur in The Land Before Time, I think, like 6.
Yeah. Which is so funny because, like, if you could look at the line graph of every time I've ever thought about Chris Christopherson, it's like all my life, it's like the occasional blip. And then October 2020, it's like, bing, bing, bing. now I'm thinking about Chris Christopherson all the time. So that's a fun little, it's just, I was going to say it's because this movie's so famous that it permeates culture, but it's like The Boys one is a better example of that. Mine's just a celebrity I've heard of. Like, I haven't watched.
Yeah, Ryan's story was better than yours.
I agree.
well, I didn't want to go into much detail as to not spoil,
It's all
The
good.
Boys.
The
Boys. Well, here's the boys here.
Yeah, we're the boys now.
Yeah, boys.
Look at me.
In
I am the
sales.
boys now.
There's a lady with this. Didn't Brent say your dog's name was Amy? Or?
Oh yeah, that's true. She's
the dog left though.
just destroying a gnome right now.
Ooh.
Is that a metaphor?
It's whatever you want it to be.
For society.
Wow.
Whoa.
Society really is a dog toy when you think about it.
It's true. Cool. Well, I have exhausted my talking points a little earlier than I intended to, but I can scour the Wikipedia page for more stuff.
Well, I have something I want to discuss.
Yeah.
So I was watching some of like the special features because I grabbed the 40th anniversary, special edition. I watched some of the special features, didn't take a lot of notes. But one thing I saw was Martin Scorsese originally considered Dustin Hoffman for Travis, which I think that's an interesting choice as well.
That is really interesting.
For me, I won't like anything prior. I would have seen like The Graduate for Dustin Hoffman, like before this performance, and it's like to see that like not necessarily the same character, but like an innocent person. But then see this man corrupted. It's like, how would he have played that? Would he have played him like a lot more innocent or more on the edge? How would Dustin Hoffman would have done it?
Well, that's interesting because I feel like it's a similar thing because watching this film now, going back so many 44 years and seeing an early Robert De Niro performance, having the context of all of his other films, it's like you kind of expect him to go off the rails a little bit. And it's the same kind of thing that Stephen King didn't like about Jack Nicholson being cast in The Shining. And he wanted Harrison Ford because it's like, if you see Harrison Ford break and go psychotic, it's actually a shock. Whereas Jack Nicholson was just coming off the back of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, so you expected a little bit. And so Dustin Hoffman, he was in like, I guess, Midnight Cowboy would have been before this, I think, or might be just after, but
I just pulled up a wiki. He I think what's relevant and what he might have seen in it is that in 71, so this movie came out in 76. In 71, Hoffman did Straw Dogs. Have any of y'all seen that?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So, and that's a movie very much where he snaps and ends up, pretty in a very brutal situation. So that might be what he was thinking about or using as an influence.
I did see as well that speaking of The Godfather, from speaking on the Cult Popture podcast about The Godfather, that came. So the timeline is like Robert De Niro signed on for Taxi Driver, appeared in The Godfather Part 2. His star rose. He signed on for Taxi Driver for like $300,000, and then he became the biggest star in the world. And then had to film Taxi Driver, and they were like, "Oh fuck, we're going to pay us so much, we don't have the money." But he's like, "No, I signed a contract, I'll honor it," kind of thing. So he got paid not a lot of money for this movie, because he signed it when he was a nobody. Also, just talking of what's going on in people's backgrounds of Zoom, Ryan. I see a crate in the background, and I saw what I thought was a tail on the couch behind you earlier, and I was like, "Oh, Ryan has a dog as well." I was gonna be like, "Oh, show us your dog," but then I saw a human hand come out, and I was like, "Oh, Jesus Christ!"
That's my girlfriend on the couch, but I did see this in the background. I thought she was doing the Travis. No, I have a little dachshund. She's over on the couch, right next to my girlfriend.
What's your dog's name?
Memory.
Oh.
Memory.
Ooh.
She's passed out in the corner.
Memory.
Yeah.
What's your girlfriend's name?
Angela, you want to come make an appearance? She's playing Lego Harry Potter on the couch.
Ooh,
She has
that's
to
a good
pay.
one.
She has to pay if she wants to make an appearance.
Yeah, you have to pay.
In Lego Harry Potter, can you customize characters and put a girl's head on a male's body?
Can you customize a minifigure in Lego Harry Potter? No, I think they don't do that till Lego Star Wars.
No, I'm not surprised they wouldn't. We were talking at work the other day where it's like, do you think Slytherins are transphobic, or would Gryffindors be transphobic? Because
no, the Slytherins would be the trans.
Yeah, from J.K. Rowling's perspective, the heroes are the transphobic ones. What house are you in? Evil, pussies, nerds, or the heroes?
Or good people, yeah.
Or good people.
I love how I'm not into Harry Potter so much. I just hear I'm aware of the J.K. Rowling stuff, so it's so funny. I have no investment in it, so just hearing all the everyone turning against her, and I'm like, yeah, I have no problem with this. She seems like a scumbag.
Yeah, that was me when Game of Thrones the last seasons were terrible. I was like, that's what you get.
We get for loving something. I'm gifted with not being that diehard for Harry Potter, so I'll easily never consume a Harry Potter piece of content.
I think I'd only seen an odd number of the movies. I think I'd only seen 1, 2, 3, and then I had seen 5, 6. I don't know. I mean 5, 7. I don't know why I didn't see. I had skipped after that. But now I'll never go back.
Going back to what we were talking about with Dustin Hoffman, that's it's so hard to imagine anyone else but Robert De Niro having this role now, not because of the role is necessarily iconic, but because it's so important to Robert De Niro's career that he played this character, right? If Dustin Hoffman played this character, I don't think "You Talking to Me" would be a catchprise, because
it was also improvised by Robert De Niro, and Dustin Hoffman might not have come off it. He would have been like, "I'm walking here," because a Robert De Niro impression is, "You talking to me? You talk like this." This is a Robert De Niro impression. But what's a Dustin Hoffman impression? I'm walking here.
I'm walking. Yeah, Rain Man, which you'll get in trouble for doing an impression of, probably.
Oh, damn lefties took away our Dustin Hoffman impressions. Yeah. It is interesting. These kind of all these Hollywood what ifs. What's everyone's favorite Hollywood what if?
Ideal casting,
or just any thing that almost happened.
Nicolas Cage's Superman.
Yeah, that's a big one.
O.J. Simpson is the Terminator.
Yeah, man.
Only because it would have been so much more ironic and funny if it actually
Yeah.
happened, instead of just that I go-to trivia. Movie trivia.
Yeah,
Did you
no,
know?
that's a good one.
Mine's probably Miller's Justice League.
Mm.
Just that 2007, just how much he was going to go for, and they were about to shoot, and then just nope. And like, I still would have loved to see what he would have done with that movie.
Armie Hammer's a good cast for Bruce Wayne.
He's a very good cast.
Yeah. He Armie Hammer, man, like he's like just missed out on so many roles. It's like, like Henry Cavill when he finally got Superman, it's like, oh, he missed out on all these roles. It's like Armie Hammer's still missing out on them. His big blockbuster was The Lone Ranger.
He's in Man from Uncle too, right?
Yeah, The Man from Uncle.
I actually like that movie.
I think a lot of people do.
Yeah.
Him and Henry Cavill's in it with him.
Nice.
You're right. Yeah, so anyone have any other thoughts on Taxi Driver?
I got something else from the special features. Oh, Brent, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was just gonna say I really liked how like the city kind of played a character itself. It felt very alive in a way that even when you're shooting in New York and things like that, that doesn't come across. But like the scene where he's standing on the corner and he's talking to the pimp, and like there's other people that are coming and going, and it just felt very authentic. In some of the dialogue from the pimp was ridiculous, but just kind of like the mise en scene, I guess, felt very authentic.
Nice.
Also, we missed this at the start because you joined us late, Brent. But had you seen this before?
No, I watched it for this thing.
No. It is a very it is interesting how differently you can paint a portrait of a city. Like looking at different films, like actually shot in New York at the same time, and how like it can make it seem like it's a totally different place. But I mean, I guess probably just as accurate in some ways.
I wish New Zealand was more on the map for film so that we could be like Auckland as a city in the film. As a character.
New Zealand's not even on the map for maps.
Like I wonder if New Zealand was as big as America, what would be it? Because New Zealand cities don't have as strong of an identity as more mainstream countries' cities, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, they do to New Zealanders, but
but like I've never been to America, and I know the identity of New York and California, whereas like I don't know. What do you guys think New Zealand city? Does anyone have any perception of New Zealand cities? No, exactly. I just say that,
right?
Yeah, well, no, it's not though. Like, I just say that I when I talk about New Zealand cities, I make comparisons to American cities and what I imagine they are. Like, I say that Auckland is like the California, or Auckland's like LA, Wellington's like New York, or San Francisco, a weird New York San Francisco crossover, and Christchurch is like slowly becoming Portland, but it's still probably a bit too backwards
racist
and hillbilly to be Portland.
Are there accent differences between the islands? Like, can you hear someone?
The biggest thing is that the further south you go, people roll their R's.
So they talk like this instead of
dirty purple work skirt. Dirty purple work skirt is the thing that people say. Like, it's hard to do.
Yeah, it is hard to do. And if you go further north, so me and Richard both have what I would describe from my perspective as kind of like a middle accent, right? Like it's not south and it's not north, because further north it becomes more articulated. And you talk a bit more like this, like Ponsonby, which is a very rich suburb in Auckland. There's like the Ponsonby mum stereotype. And Ponsonby mums talk like this, and they're like, thank you, I'll get a soy latte, thank you. And like, so that's the exaggerated,
Yeah.
Down south with all the farmers, it's just sort of like this.
Yeah, out here in Rangiora.
It sounds like you're doing a American South accent in a New Zealand accent.
Yeah, I was going to say that's exactly what it sounds like.
Ryan, you've got a new guest there behind you. Look out!
Oh, we've got Zoom backgrounds.
Whoa.
50 minutes in, this is what it comes to.
I've never
Anyone
messed
got any
with
more
Zoom
content?
before.
Fuck, how do I change the background?
How do you change backgrounds?
I was
Oh,
just
you-
messing around. I had never seen messed around on Zoom before. I just clicked my camera and I'm like, oh, background, okay. Oh, so this is how they do
Okay,
it.
huh? You
Use
talking to
virtual
me?
background.
You talking to
Um,
me?
Maybe that's something fun we can all set up for next week.
Add image.
Uh-oh.
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail. Are you recording visual as well as audio?
Here, dude.
I thought that was just a joke for us.
That didn't work at all, did it?
Oh.
Oh my god, you look
That is
demonic.
horrifying.
You look like evil Papa Smurf.
That needs to be the thumbnail for this.
Oh, really?
Oh.
I didn't mean to ruin the end of the podcast. My bad.
No, it's good.
This is great.
Mine only affects the mirror.
So are
That
y'all
actually
just
worked
gonna
very
put
well.
this up like as it is on the YouTube, or what are y'all
Pretty
doing
much.
with this?
Don't have a
Yeah.
lot of time to edit it. You need, so.
Yeah.
And it'll just be a
Balls.
video as well. So yeah, well, that probably brings us to probably the end of the show. I think we can wrap it up here. But before we do similar to Film Franchise Fortnights, we do have a roulette that we're going to play, which is me and Richard have listed 200 classic.
201 now.
Oh,
Yeah,
Ooh.
just cult classics.
cult classics.
So this is films. What are the kind of rules for it? They have to
So-
be they're generally considered good.
Yeah, generally considered good and culturally significant. We haven't included anything with a sequel, as to avoid crossover with Film Franchise Fortnights. Nothing from the last 10 years. So there's a 10-year.
Yep.
You have to, the movie has to be at least 10 years old. And that's, I think, it. Is there anything else?
Yeah. So as we've kind of started to do on Film Franchise Fortnights, I'm going to randomly do the random number generator, and I'll get a movie, and I'll give clues, and you guys have to guess what it is. But so this is a list of 201 classic films from Citizen Kane down to Legend of the Guardians, The Owls of Ga'Hoole, which is a week over being 10 years old.
Which is why it's on the list, and it is the only movie of its caliber on the list. It's like the wild card. It's like maybe we'll get Guardians of Ga'Hoole.
That'll be the running gag in this.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
Snyder classic.
That movie's always intrigued me. I've never seen it though. Maybe that'll be big.
All right. Okay, here we go.
2.
Two.
That hasn't even happened
It's two?
on Film Franchise Fortnights. It's never been 2. Well, what's 2 then?
Okay, let me just pull
Let
it
me
up.
just change the order.
That's so funny because AJ was like, "Oh, we should randomize the list because it's kind of in order of like chronological order." But then we're like, "Well, if it's randomly chosen, it won't matter anyway."
That's
So-
still true.
It is still true, but there's a clue that it's like it's a very early film. It's not quite Citizen Kane early, but it's a who directed this? Michael Curtis?
I thought it was Vertigo.
No.
That feels like it would have been the second film I would have written down.
Nah, it's a romantic drama film. Any takers?
What year is it from?
Yeah, what year?
1942.
Casablanca.
It is Casablanca.
Ah, awesome!
Ah.
You said
love
not
Ca-
as early. You said not as early as Citizen Kane, so I got like thrown off because isn't that like 10 years after that?
Yeah. Wait.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm glad I called it though. Okay.
Cool. Well, Casablanca for next month. We will get to you guys
Citizen Kane came out a year earlier.
There you go.
Oh, okay.
We'll
It's
get
not
you guys
quite as
the.
early.
I just
The-
misheard you.
Oh, good. We'll get you guys the date that we will be watching it. We'll still figure that out. It'll probably
Yeah.
be
The timing will move around a little bit.
yeah. It'll
So-
be whatever weekend is closest to the 10th of the month.
Yeah.
Essentially, is how we're going to do it.
I think I actually had this one on DVD somewhere.
Oh,
It's
can I
good.
borrow it?
Yes.
I hear it's pretty good.
Sure. Yeah, I'll mail it to you. You can just send it back though, so I can watch it.
Yeah.
You have a month.
It'll be our mailing efforts.
Cool. Well, thank you for joining us, patrons, and thank you for watching this or listening to this, if anyone did. It's going up on the Cult Popture Podcast YouTube channel more as preservation than necessarily
Us
displayed
five
content.
to reminisce
you know.
about this call.
Well, just it feels like a shame to throw any content away, you know. So
Right.
it'll stay up. And thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next month for another episode of the Cult Popture Movie Club with our cult classic patrons. Thank you very
Casablanca.
much. Casablanca.
Cult classic Casablanca, all spelt with K's.
No.
No.
What about Cacablanca? We'll save this for next month. We'll save this for next month.
Oh, Danger, write that down though.
All right. See you, everybody. Bye.
Bye.